Okay, I think we are in streaming right now. And if you agree, I will start saying good morning here in Mexico and New York and Victoria, of course. Good evening in Madrid because Luz has another, it's more or less 18 hours, I think, in Madrid. It's my pleasure to chair this wonderful panel to celebrate the launch of my very dear colleague and friend Hamid Dabashi's latest book, The Last Muslim Intellectual, The Life and Legacy of Jalal Ali Ahmed. First of all, I have to say that I'm very happy for having the chance of putting together three of my most beloved colleagues in the area of Middle East studies. And I'm saying this from the deepest place of my heart, as you know, because all of you are people who are in my heart, who are in my life, in my not only my professional life, but also in my personal life. And at the same time, I think you are three amazing professors and amazing human beings, and with high compromise with social change and social justice around the world. So it's a privilege to be here with all of you. And thank you for accepting this humble invitation and for making this possible. I have to say quickly that this presentation is possible thanks to the collaboration of several institutions and projects, such as the Edinburgh University Press. The people who are following this streaming will have a code of discount at the end of the panel. So I will give some details at the end of the presentation. Also, I have to thank the group of Middle East Studies Workshop, the Faculty of Political Social Sciences at my university, and in a specific way, the research project, Social Justice and Sectarianism in the Middle East, supported by the General Directorate of Academic Personal Affairs of my university. The most important thing is that this event has a very great value, not only for the people who will speak, but also for the people who will listen and hopefully later will read the book and produce new ideas on it. So I take advantage of this time to send my best and warm regards to all my students and my colleagues in my faculty who, in one way or another, are following this event through the Facebook page of the Middle East Studies Workshop via streaming. Well, the book, as you will see, is monumental. We were talking about this. It's a magnificent trajectory of a very unique intellectual in Iran, who in Latin America, at least, is known by his book, Garbzadegi, West Taxification, and for his medical language to make diagnosis of social political diseases in our peoples in the time of the Cold War. However, just as you will find it in the book, Hamid Dabashi traces a kind of secular mirage. I put it in this way, secular mirage, a literary journey in which in every place and moment where Jalal Ahmed was, I mean, from Soviet Union to US, from Palestine to other parts of the world, he recognizes himself as an intellectual, always in connection with in his interlocutors. Where his wife was more than a partner. She was a poet by her own office, and she was the best rawiya who narrate not only the classical angles of Jalal Ahmed's life, but also other details of Ali Ahmed intellectual and sentimental life. So to begin with, I would like to introduce our panelists one by one. They will have 15 minutes each to expose their ideas on the book, the feelings, kind of feedback. You have to know that it is a tradition here at my university that the author of the book speaks at the end. So I mean, after the review. So at the end, I will request Ustaz Dabashi to speak, and he will have another 15 minutes to complement or make another feedbacks to the comments of the Luz or the comments of Payman. And last but not least, we will see if we have questions, ideas, comments, or feedbacks by our audience. So welcome again, my very dear friends. The first speaker is my very dear friend, Professor, colleague, Ustaza Luz Gomez Garcia, who is a professor of Arabic and Islamic Studies at the Autonomous University of Madrid. She has a PhD in Arabic philology from the very same university. She expanded studies at the American University in Cairo. He has been a visiting scholar at Columbia University in New York. She belongs to the Traveling Concepts in Feminist Pedagogy research group of the Athena European Network. And I want to mention something that I am very proud of her, because she is the translator of many Arabic poetry from Arabic to Spanish language, but in a specific way, the work of Mahmoud Darwish. In fact, she won the National Prize of Translation in Spain some years ago by the translation of this wonderful book, En Presencia de la Ausencia, which is a very important work of Mahmoud Darwish. And we read her works, her feelings, and her political analysis of the Arab world very, very often in Mexico and Latin America, in the writings in some important newspapers like El País and other important newspapers. So if we are going to talk about the book of Hamid, it's very necessary to talk of the books of the people who present the book of Hamid. So, very dear colleague, my friend Luz, thank you very much for being here. The floor is yours.
Hello, good evening, good morning, and thank you very much, Moises, by this opportunity. I need to ask your pardon for my English, but I have forgotten it totally in last years. As I live here in Spain, and we think and speak in Spain only, it's horrible. We are not like you in Mexico, Moises. Thank you very much by this opportunity, and thank you very much for the audience to be with us and to think that I have something to say to this book. I was talking with Moises at the beginning of our meeting without the audience, and I was explaining him how it's difficult for me to say something about this book, because everything is in the book. So I was thinking what I am going to say today, and yesterday I thought tomorrow what I am going to say. I don't know what to give you, as you, I mean not Ustaz Dabashi, but the people who is listening to us. So on Saturday I put on Twitter, I love Twitter. I don't know why, but I love Twitter. So I put on Twitter a tweet, and somebody answered the tweet saying, what does, in Spanish of course, what does this mean? The last Muslim intellectual? This is very proud. Who is proud of being Muslim and of being an intellectual? And another tweet told, there are a lot of Muslim intellectuals, and Jalal Ahmad is not the last one, because we have, and there were some names, and these were the names the people in Twitter told me. They told, just a minute, they call Yusuf Al-Qardawi, the Sheikh, Abdel Karim Shurur on theology, Tariq Ramadan on philosophy, Mahmoud Mamdani on anthropology, Fethullah Gulen without nothing, and Muhammad Yunus without nothing. So I was thinking about how this book and Ustaz Dabashi can explain to these people, and the last one was an Spanish Muslim, because the name was Abdel Karim Mateo, so he was Spanish, and he was from Spain because the flag was the Spanish flag. And I thought, what can we do in these times of Twitter, of this kind of speedy thinking, with a book like this one. It's a book with more than 300 pages, I don't know, 340 or something like that. But Twitter is just this kind of thinking. So I was thinking about this just in order to put this proposal of Islamic liberation theology to this kind of Muslim people in the West, not even in Iran or in the Arab country, but here in Spain, with this kind of thinking. This is one of the main questions I had to put you. The other one is in relation with the translation, because as Moises has said, I used to translate. I love translation, but I used to translate poetry, only poetry. I don't, because it's just a kind of linguistic and hermeneutical exercise. So just about the last book of Mahmoud Darwish, not the last one, but the one we have said, Fihatrat al-Ghiyab. And when I read your book, I was thinking about how Jalal al-Ahmad was present in this reading, in this reading of you and this reading of mine through your reading, how she is present but is totally absent of a Spanish landscape, intellectual landscape. And when I speak about Spanish, I speak about Spanish language, not only the European country or my small land, but in Latin America, it's the same. We don't have translations of Jalal al-Ahmad, so we can read it. And when I say we, I say my students, the intellectual the medium here in Spain, because English is not really a global language. It's a globalist. It's the language of globalization, but not the language of everybody. Not here in Spain. It's very different from America, from Latin America. So Jalal al-Ahmad doesn't exist here. I am sure that even in my university here, I am at the university now. In my department, we are 21 teachers. I am sure that only 4 of us have heard of him. And we are in a Middle Eastern department, the studies department. So, and this is not because of the ignorance of my colleagues, maybe some of them, but not because of that, because we don't have a translation. So which is the role of translation, and the translation, not only the translation of the works, but the translation of the medium, the translation of the biographical context, the translation of the real meaning of translation as a traveling process between space, time. And this is very important to a question I want to speak with you about it. Finally, there is something very important for me in your book that you call reclaiming the past for the future. I don't know if the way for the future is the past. I'm not sure. And not even with Jalal al-Ahmad, because I think that this time and this new even now in this process of the pandemic and the coronavirus, the past has no meaning. There are really a very few signs in the past we can read and we can translate for the future. We need to translate them to the future, but I am not sure what's speaking about post-Islamism is the way. And if we don't need to forget Islamism, even not post-Islamism, but even Islamism. So I think that there are, your book opens a lot of questions for me in this real context that I am living on, and I am working, and I am as a teacher, but I am living as a woman in Spain, no, as an intellectual. This is another question, and the third one is just because I am interested in it. So it's about if you see some relationship between Jalal al-Ahmad and the Latin American context in the 60s, because in terms of postcoloniality, of critical thinking, of reclaiming the past now, I think that I am not a specialist in this kind of intellectual work, but I think that there are some intellectuals in Latin America in the same period, in the 60s, that may have some connections, some relationship with Jalal Ahmed not biography, intellectual biography and thinking. And I think that for our audience, it will be very interesting to listen to you about this main question of the relationship between Latin America and the Iranian contest. So this is my not my reading, but this is the questions I have. I want to ask you as a member of the audience in order to begin a talking or a conversation. So thank you very much for this opportunity to read and to speak with you and with Jalal Ahmad through your book. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benedict Luz. Thank you very much. Amazing points that will be covered at the end when Ustaz Dabashi had the opportunity to speak. Now we are with our second speaker, Dr. Peyman Behabzadeh, a very dear friend. How are you, my very dear Peyman? Chetori?
Well, merci. Thank you for
having me. My dear friend.
Thank you for having me.
Professor at University of Victoria, from where he also obtained a postdoctoral fellowship in the Department of Political Science. Dr. Behabzadeh's lifelong interest is in human collective action and social movements. He continues to study the generative power of social movements for societal renewal in the conditions under which individuals become actors, activists, or agents. His areas of research and teaching include classical and contemporary social theory, social movements, phenomenology, exile, post-colonial studies, violence and nonviolence, and Iranian studies. He is the author of many books. I just want to mention one of the recent books, A Rebel's Journey of Mustafa Shaoyan, a revolutionary theory in Iran, and this one that he gave us some years ago for the library of my university, Violence and Nonviolence, and this is a conceptual excursions into the phantom opposites. Peyman Behabzadeh also has books in Persian, in poetry, fiction, literary criticism, and memoirs. So Peyman Behabzadeh, thank you very much, my dear friend, for your time. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, dear friend Moises. Always a pleasure to be in your company and in the company, of course, of our mutual friend Professor Dabashi. And nice to meet you, Luz. And it's such a great pleasure to be here. So I'm speaking to you from University of Victoria, where the university actually stands in the territories of Lekwungen speaking people, the Sankis, Esquimals, and Wasanich peoples, in the unceded territories of Kos and Salish people. And this is the story of decolonization. So I'm sitting here, on this very nice campus, if you visit it, and it's just, it's, what I see is the history of colonization and attempts to decolonize, and all the efforts to make decolonization possible. And that is, I think, probably one way of relating to Professor Dabashi's new book on Jalal al-Ahmad, where Jalal actually shown in the age of the heightened anti-colonization movements and decolonization and post-colonial states and wars of liberation and all that magnificent era of liberation. Okay, and this brings this book brings to our attention as part of a fabulous intellectual history of the 20th century Iran, and it's all in its all diversity. It brings the newest sort of engagement with one of the foremost intellectuals of this time. One of the merits of this book is that It situates Al-Ahmad in his historic context. I would say a very unique context, the 1960s in Iran. It was the post-coup d'etat 1950 era. People have sort of, for about 6, 7, 8 years, they have been socialized into the realities of post-coup era. And they had realized that they're dealing with a very, severe and imposing dictatorship. And they were trying, the intellectuals at least, they were trying to find ways out of this. So it's one of the study of Iran, intellectual history of Iran in the 1960s, not on any specific intellectual, but in total, just that that would be a fabulous book, and it's a huge undertaking. But 1960s, or Hazar Sisal in Iran, was actually a decade of flourishing journals and translations. So it was a time of diverse, uncanonical, exploratory sort of intellectual engagements with the world. The world was coming to Iran. Iran was going into the world. And this is what, Hamid Dabashi says in many other books, the cosmopolitan spirit. That it's the best known era of cosmopolitan, Iran. That's the best shown, in those, journals and those, when I say, I'm not just saying journals, I'm talking about theater. I'm talking about, some very cautious moves in making new wave films. And of course, we have, Professor Dabashi is an expert on that, and poetry. This is the decade of not just Ahmad Shamlu and Mehdi Akhavan Sales with their very important poetry, but the ones that actually deviated from the mainstream sort of poetry, such as Forough Farrokhzad with her sort of feminist poetry, such as Sohrab Sepehri with sort of Eastern, sort of Buddhist sort of poetry, with Bijan Jalali with his simplicity, and so on and so forth. So this is the period of experiments in the journals, and I'm happy to say that I have collected as much as I could, most of the journals of this time. You can see translations of Gramsci, Kawam Nkrumah, just naming a few: Heidegger, Foucault, Fanon, Langston Hughes, MSSR, Julia Kristeva, Hannah Arendt, Isaac Dorche, just name it. It's this fabulous era. The reason I'm putting this context together is, yes, we do know that Jalal's career as a writer started in the 1950s, but he really shone in the 1960s. He really became that imposing figure in Iranian intellectual scene in that era. You should probably you probably do know, but you should also, if you don't, you should know that while he was a sort of a security nuisance for Iranian security, kind of, somebody they always watched, they always went to his sessions, they always went to his lectures, speeches, and so on and so forth. And, Savak made reports of him, but he was the untouchable man. So he grew in that sense, that he became such a public intellectual that he became an untouchable man. Now, this era, just like, Hamid Dabashi shows in the new book, is a point of termination, or at least this is the way I read the book, that Al-Ahmad's cosmopolitanism, cosmopolitan Muslim, thinking gradually degenerated in the 1970s in Shariati's essentialist Shia liberation, sort of liberation. And then we had Murtaza Motahari's, Islamism that, wanted to sort of negotiate with the intellectual scene, but in my view, it was total failure. And of course, after the revolution and the Islamist takeover of the revolution, we have this very strange chimera of religious intellectuals or Roshan Fikran Dini. So you can see from Al-Ahmad in the 60s all the way to the 1980s and 90s, this is the story of a degeneration of cosmopolitan Muslim into really self-centered Islamist and by Islamist, I just mean Shiist, basically, that thinks, and Shiism being a minority within the, Muslim world, that think this Shia minority thinks that they can speak for the entire Muslim world. So that's one of the paradoxes of the time. So the last Muslim intellectual, the title, of course, as Professor Dabashi addresses, is a reworking of Russell Jacobs' The Last Intellectual, where he talks about, and that's one of my favorite books, where he talks about, what happened to American intellectual scene, and what happens was basically, the book is complex, but I reduce it to two things. One is the loss of Bohemia, where you could actually be a public intellectual right, get royalties and live on that. And secondly, so the first one was an economic factor. And second one was professionalization of intellectual work in the body of university. So most intellectuals, public intellectuals, got marginalized in the US, and some got absorbed into university and became professors and so on and so forth, right? So in a way, this doesn't apply to Iran, but in a way it's reminiscent of what happened to Jalal al-Ahmad, because Jalal al-Ahmad, as Simin Daneshvar, they could live on their writing, basically, right? In the 1960s, something you could not do probably ever after that. Maybe if you were Ahmad Shamlu, who was unique, maybe Simin Behbahani, they could live on their royalties and on writing, but that became impossible. So economically, like I said, this decade is unique because it's economically is possible for some outstanding writer such as Jalal al-Ahmad to actually live off his pen, so to speak, right? And secondly, in terms of loss of Bohemia, so that translates loosely into that. But secondly is that the degeneration that I talked about, that the intellectual scene got narrowed down, right? And I've been, my favorite decade is the 60s, but I've always worked on the 1970s. So the 1970s is the age of, guerrilla warfare and polarization of society, and the age of Ali Shariati and Mujahideen the Khalq, and People's Fadai guerrillas, the Marxists, and all kinds of Maoists and so on and so forth, right? So this 1970s is the age of transition, right? So this is why Jalal al-Ahmad, for me, when I was reading him at a very young age, was a totally confusing figure, right? He speaks Muslim words, so to speak, but he's kind of socialist and Marxist. Right? To the extent that when he dies, Amir Parviz Pouyan, the co-founder of the Marxist guerrillas in Iran, writes a kind of obituary for him, and says and wishes for that Jalal who would come forward and join the guerrillas, but he never did that, and he would never do that. And that's the thing, the guerrillas were founded later, a couple of years later after Jalal's death. But the kind of confusing figure, right? And this is why this confusing figure in the post-revolutionary scholarship mostly had to be reduced to one thing or another, right? He's nativist, or he's with the Islamic Republic, thanks to his very dubious attempts, of his brother, in bringing him close to the regime and so on and so forth. So this very flamboyant, diverse, explosive figure had to be reduced. So, a few years back when I was doing my Shoaiyan book, I had to go back and read Jalal al-Ahmad because they had meetings, Shoaiyan. So I said, I have to really understand this, and so I went back and said, well, this is like Professor Dabashi shows, there's a lot of redundancies, there's a lot of impatience and fast brain activity in his work. But when he has a thesis to develop, he's fabulous, right? Just like, Hamid Dabashi shows that the one chapter in Gharb-Zadegi is absolutely great. And the rest is just, wow, like generalization after generalization and so on. So this is the confusing figure that I was really interested in. Now, what common historiography does is basically chronicles events in the proper historic context and offers some analysis. And that's very good because it brings historical events to our attention. But what the work of Professor Dabashi does here is actually to hermeneutically decode how to read Jalal al-Ahmad. And that's exactly what we need to do. Each epoch, each era, and each thinker is hermeneutically linked to a number of elements, local or global, doesn't matter, right? And I was really, truly exhilarated and got excited about the decoding of Jalal al-Ahmad in terms of anima and animus and connection to Simin Daneshvar. And that is something that was absolutely unique about this book, that Daneshvar and al-Ahmad were in this, at times, very troubling due to Jalal al-Ahmad's strange behavior. I don't know why. But these were really connected intellectual, Professor Dabashi says in the book, like Diego Rivera and Farida Kahlo, right? Just to bring it home to Mexico, right? And so on, right? So this is the thing. This is like the decoding the way, Al-Ahmad's thinking goes in relation to the, sort of domestic, so to speak, because we are not privy to that, but domestic dialogues he must have had with Simin throughout his career, almost his entire career, and how Simin actually, Simin was the feminine in Jalal, and Jalal was the masculine in Simin, and that was brilliant. And of course, that also reflects in Simin's later, reflections on Jalal's life, but also in his, tremendously important and popular novel, Savushun, who registered Simin. That one book registered Simin Daneshvar as the novelist par excellence in Iranian cinema. That in the 1960s, for a female writer, is a big, big, huge event, right? So, but in terms of my engagement, I don't know how much time I have, so we are dealing with Jalal al-Ahmad, who has socialist tendencies, follows the Socialist League leader Khalil Maleki throughout his life, is very fond of this man, and goes to the Hajj pilgrimage, but he doesn't quit his vodka, right? And by vodka, I don't mean like Absolute or Smirnoff or fancy things like that. I'm talking about Araq Sagi, right? Which was basically the vodka of our time, which translates into I don't know, doggy extract or something like that. It was really bad. And I have a bottle of that in my fridge for the past 10 years. It's really hard to swallow. So we are talking about that vodka. We are not talking about fancy vodka. But he never quit that. And he was a chain smoker also, right? But that's beside our point. So this contradictory figure, how can we read him in his context? And I think this book actually succeeds in establishing what is important in Jalal al-Ahmad and what is too fast, too general, too hasty, and could be worked out maybe later through some creative interpretation. But it's basically, a lot of it is redundancies. But when I say redundancy, I don't mean to exclude. I mean some of these generalizations in his fast-paced thinking are actually meant to, be congealed into something more reasonable and something more far-reaching. Like, certain chapters in his books are always brilliant. Certain others are just, at times statistical, rubbish, like he offers, every now and then. But I think those things that we find irrelevant are actually windows for him in his own way of thinking to arrive at those conclusions that he arrives at, and not always in the form of conclusion. But a few points I have about this book, a few questions I have, is what do we know about, why would Jalal join, somebody from a clerical family, you know, his father and his two, I think two of his brothers were actually clergy, Shi clergies. And why would he join the Tudeh party, for heaven's sake, to begin with? That's a mystery for me. Okay, I understand that Tudeh had a cachet at that time and so on and so forth. But why would you choose Tudeh party? Why not join the nationalists or whatever? And secondly was about his relationship with I don't know how to say this because there's not really, it's a speculative thing, but his relationship to the politics of the 1960s, the opening in the 1960s, the kind of semi-democratic or semi-relaxed conditions in the between 1960 and 1963. And the last one is that mysterious meeting with Ayatollah Khomeini in 1963. Did it actually happen? Or was it one of these fabulously constructed and fabricated things that became history? Because everyone I see says, yeah, Jalal shook Khomeini's hand in 1963 before he was exiled and said, may these two hands never be separated, like between intellectuals and was that really true? So this is one of those mysterious things I always wanted to confirm. So I stop here. Just wanted to say that I really enjoyed this book. The idea of Muslim liberation theology, I think it's a very interesting idea to decolonize the Muslim culture or the Muslim world, so to speak, not just through political or economic decolonization, but what Hamid Dabashi has in mind, intellectual decolonization that overcomes all these divisions and understands, being Muslim as a kind of civilizational identity, right? So these are really the points that I have. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Payman. Now we are going to see the opportunity of Hamid to answer and to develop some ideas of his book. Ustaz, what I can say about you, dear Ustaz Bashi, I was telling to my students how important you have been for us in Mexican Academy. The first time Ustaz Dabashi came to Mexico was in 2014 in the context of the awful murder of Ayotzinapa students here in Mexico. I remember he delivered a couple of conferences about the semiotics of overcoming. That was the title of the conference. I still keep the flyer of that event. After that, Hamid came to a couple of events of the Faculty of Political Social Sciences with Ilan Pape and other Spanish friends, and he presented his book Persophilia in a wonderful meeting with some Iranian colleagues here in Mexico City. He knows my wife, he knows my friends, I know his children. He has cooked Iranian food, Iranian dishes at my home. He's my friend and brother. He and Peyman presented my latest book 3 months ago, and now we are presenting his own book here with Luz. And I am very happy to have the honor to coincide in this live with you, Ustaz, with Peyman, with Luz. You are my very dear friends, and Hamid Dabashi has been my inspiration. This is the first word I mentioned when I met him in London some years ago. And of course, he has degrees in Pennsylvania, Harvard, and works in Columbia University, and has this wonderful book. So please, Ustaz Dabashi. Thank you.
Okay, let me first see that I'm not mute. Yes, so you can hear me. Number one, Musa, I hope that you're recording this so we can share it with friends, colleagues. Number two, I'm very grateful to you personally for organizing this event. Yes, we have all zoomed out, as they say, but at the same time, how in the world otherwise could I have three dear, distinguished colleagues from Mexico, from Spain, and from Canada joining me here in New York to have an event? So I'm grateful to Professor Garcia that I'm meeting for the first time. It's an honor to meet you. I'm absolutely delighted to see my dear friend Peyman. whom I deeply admire. And every time I see him, I'm reminded of the time we have spent in Canada together. Um, Now, this book, I hope, I don't know if you have received the physical copy. I haven't received the physical copy yet, but it's a book that has been in me and with me for quite some time. I always use the metaphor of a potter, the Omar Khayyam metaphor of a potter. I think of myself as a potter in my pottery workshop. I'm building things, and then one of the pots that I have made kind of looks complete, and I put it in the window. It is a very precious book to me because as we age, as I am aging, how we spend our time, what issues we address, are becoming. We have to budget. We have to budget our time. We have to budget our eyesight. We have to budget our waking times and so forth. In a way, it is, as I say in the book, autobiographical. It comes immediately after the collection of my essays in my book on Edward Said, uh, Remembrance of Things Past, which becomes the title of a chapter in Al Ahmad's book. Al Ahmad, in a way, as Peyman just said, was Edward Said of our time, and Edward Said was Al Ahmad of New York, in a way. And I'm going to just address a few issues that my dear colleagues have raised. The most provocative and wonderful is Professor Garcia's reference to Twitter, that she put on Twitter the title of this book, and people began to kick and scream, you know, what is the last Muslim intellectual? It is a peculiar thing about Iranians and Muslims that they start criticizing a book before they have seen it, just by the title. They don't like the title. And the title is a deliberately provocative title. And as Peyman said, it is play with Russell Jacoby's book, The Last Intellectual. And in the book, as you know, I engage with Russell Jacoby's book, both because of the two items that Peyman said, but also I put forward that, in fact, the two major intellectual movements in the United States are not by Americans, white Americans, are actually one by African Americans during the course of Harlem Renaissance, and one is by the East European Jewish intellectuals of the 1940s and 1950s, running away from the Nazis. So the Jewish intellectual movement in New York is one movement by foreigners, people coming from Europe, and the Harlem Renaissance is the second, which is by African Americans right here in Harlem, where I live. Paying homage, just as Peyman did, I also am talking to you from the land of the Lenape Nation, on which Columbia University, as a citadel, is a colonial settlement, is built. So I always say I am their unwanted, but uninvited, but grateful guest to the Lenape Nation. I also think that Professor Garcia mentioned something very important. Everything that my colleagues have said are very important. About the title, in addition to the substance which I just hinted to, is a kind of a whodunit, you know, that joke that this person enters the movie theater and doesn't, in the old-fashioned way that they tipped the usher and doesn't tip the usher. So as soon as he sits, the usher says, the cook did it. Sort of reveals who is the murderer, just to spoil the movie for the thing. It is a provocative title, intentionally provocative title. All the names that Professor Garcia has heard are obvious examples. But the point of the argument is that we're talking about a particular temporal and epistemic moment, that a certain kind of intellectuals, being both Muslims and public intellectuals, were possible, and he was a manifestation of it. Before, again, as Peyman showed the trajectory of it, this was degenerated into sectarian affiliations. Another major point that Professor Garcia mentioned is the absence of Al Ahmad in Spanish, or even in English. There are limited translations of him available. Maybe French, German, etc. He's not available. This is the reason that I begin, and it doesn't mean that in Iran he is known. Again, as Peyman said, in Iran he has been dragged into the thing. Oh, he was highways are named after him, and stamps are published in his names, and awards are published in him. He has been appropriated by the ruling regime for, and especially through the intermediary, as Peyman said, of his Islamist brother, with in the chagrin of his late wife. And also in the other side, he's being condemned, as I argue in my book, by opponents of Islamic Republic. So in the middle, there is something that needed, as Peyman beautifully put it, decoding. And the book is an attempt to decode. And the key chapter, as Peyman noticed, is the chapter on his relationship with his wife and comrade and soulmate, Simin Daneshvar. Fortunately, when I was writing the book, 4-volume correspondences between the two of them were published. And I was just flabbergasted reading these books. About 3 of the 4 volumes are books of letters of him to her, and 1 volume are her letters to him. He writes obsessively to his wife when she was in Stanford for a fellowship. The editing is excellent. However, there are some expurgations, especially that have to do with sexual innuendos or things of that sort. There are at least 3 dots that we know something is missing. Otherwise, is an extraordinary piece of scholarship that allows us to think of the two of them in different ways. I say in the book that much to my regret, I cannot sort of shift my attention entirely to her significance, because the book is about Al Ahmad, it's not about Simin Daneshvar. But these volumes allow a magnificent rethinking of Simin Daneshvar in her own right. As to people not knowing or knowing him tangentially or ideologically, I begin my book with a quotation from a beautiful passage in Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, when a young, let's say, a scholar is meeting an aging scholar, and then is Archmaester Ambrose, who tells Samuel Tarly in season 7, we are not like the people south of the Twins, and we are not like the people north of the Twins. In the Citadel, and we are all in the Citadel, we lead different lives for different reasons. We are this world's memory, Samuel Tarly. Without us, men would be little better than dogs. Don't remember any meal but the last, can't see forward to any but the next. And every time you leave the house and shut the door, they howl like you're gone forever. You are a translator of Mahmoud Darwish, which I'm delighted to hear. There is a poem of our great poet, late Mehdi Akhavan Solis, is called Khana Hashtum, the 8th task. In Shahnameh, we have 7 tasks of Rustam, and the poem, which is in the 1950s, is called the 8th task, in which he says, Raviyam man Raviyam, I'm the storyteller. I am the storyteller. بازگویم همچنان که گفته‌ام باری. Let me repeat what I have told you many times. راوی افسانه‌های رفته از یادم. I am the storyteller of forgotten stories, of forgotten myth. I identify in this book with that poem because I am telling a story. Is very autobiographical, is my generation and Peyman's generation in Iran. I think I'm older than Peyman. Peyman, what year were you born?
I'm 10 years younger than you.
There we go. There we go. You're 1961. I'm 1951. And by that, I'm 10 years closer to the moment of crisis. We're all children of 1953 coup in Iran. I was born 1951, 2 years after. I was 2 years old when Americans made sure we don't have any democracy, and the British don't have any democracy in Iran. So when Americans tell me, go back where you came from, I tell them, you came to me before I came to you. So I am back where I came. I came from your coup d'etat. So I am home. I am at the home of the trauma that made my generation. So we are in a traumatic moment when we write about this. So time, excellent point that you make, that you're not sure if going to past is the way to future. Historically, you're absolutely correct. I mean, right now, because of the pandemic, we're going through a massive epistemic crisis. We don't know where we are and where we are headed and what the climate change means and so forth. But I mean the time in a different sort of setting. Is not just sort of 1950 until 2001, a different kind of politics of memory, of how we remember things, and how these reminiscences are instrumental in our creative and critical thinking. The other point that you made, Al-Ahmad and Latin American thinkers of the 1950s and 60s, again, as Peyman knows, the Cuban Revolution was definitive to the generation of Al-Ahmad. And they were drawn to Latin America by virtue of that revolution and by virtue of what they could learn from that revolution. Algerian Revolution, Cuban Revolution, these were this defining moment of the event. But I trace my way of thinking about Latin America actually to Jose Marti and his monumentally important essay, Our America, which is a defining moment in terms of rethinking about Latin America, independent of not just its Spanish colonial heritage, but of North American imperial domination, that ultimately results in the degeneration of Walter Mignolo and others that begin to talk about decoloniality. So this condition of decoloniality that has come to a crescendo with the generation of Walter Mignolo, in my reading, begins with the generation of Jose Marti and has reverberations throughout Latin American history. But it is not one issue that I try to bring out in the book is this cosmopolitan worldliness, that they are at the home with the world. For example, there's the chapter on his travelogues, which includes which he called it 4 Meccas. One traveled to Soviet Union in an anthropology conference. One traveled to United States, to Harvard for summer events that Henry Kissinger, of all people, had organized, and he was one of them. His wife was also there before him. So Soviet Union, United States, and the third was Jerusalem, his visit to Israel. And the book that he wrote in 2 sort of contradictory ways, before the 67 war and after 67 war. And fourth is, of course, his pilgrimage to Mecca, which to me is one of the most significant books that he wrote, namely the paradoxes of his existence as a human being. What Peyman rightly refers to as confusing, it is confusing, but it is very honest, very real. He wrote a book called Sangi Barguri, a tombstone, about the fact that he couldn't father a child, about the fact that he had an extramarital affair, the fact that he, as a Muslim man, was embarrassed and traumatized when he had to take his wife to a male gynecologist These are, I mean, today, 2021, you know, people can be very posh and liberal. Oh, this is all fine and that is backward. But for Al Ahmad in 1960s, as a Muslim, as Peymanzadeh rightly said, he was the child of a leading Ayatollah. He was not just anybody. His brother was a cleric. His uncles were clerics. His brother-in-law were clerics. He came through from a clerical family, and he was meant to be a cleric. He was sent to Najaf to study to become a seminarian. But the courage and conviction that he had, that behind his father's back, he went to quote unquote secular, namely a public school, did not continue with his education, run away from home. And the issue that Peyman raises, how could he be interested in to their party? Think to their party or Khalil Maliki. I mean, this is one of the arguments that I make. His interest in nationalism, in socialism, and in all of that were really stepstones in a course of his flamboyant life. He was living a different and flamboyant life. Then he sort of abandons all of them and starts becoming interested in existentialism, and starts reading Sartre and Camus and translates them from, you know, little command of French that he had into Persian, and then makes a living. Going back to Peyman's point about the last intellectual, he gives details. Oh, I translated this book and the publisher gave me $10 and I'm supposed to have $25 in 2 more months. These are extremely precious details that when you begin to pay attention to those details, these grand narratives of, you know, political ideologies begin to, you know, lose meaning. But to me, again, something that Peyman said and is very important is in the context of what he called decoding, is this relationship that he had with his wife. His presence in her mind and her presence in his mind. And this metaphor that I came with, anima animus metaphor, that they begin to have a gendered voice, both of them, gendered voice. They tell us, for example, when they were out for a walking and they will see something happening, they would say, well, let's make a story about this. And then they would compare their stories. And I deliberately go from classical examples of love affairs, Layli and Majnun, to contemporary couples, Sartre and Beauvoir, to Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo, you know, because of my attachment to Moises and Alejandra. I mean, these are all my beautiful memories of Mexico. I go through these examples of couples in order to, not because I'm interested in the relation between couples, but I'm interested in gendering, because he is sometimes for legitimate reasons denounced because of his patriarchy, because of his arrogance, his dismissal of gender equality. But at the same time, there is an old aunt who was also childless in his family and who was a great storyteller. And towards the end of his book on Sangi Barguri, Tombstone, which is an agonization of a man who can't father a child, what does he do? He walks to the gravesite of that old aunt that he had, who also was childless. That's the epiphany moment, which is very rare for us to witness. And he sits there and he, you know, he says his prayers for this aunt. It is a moment of kind of minutia phenomenology, not grand narrative, sort of catching up on a moment that something is happening. At the end of his Hajj pilgrimage, he says he had a brother who had died. So Peyman had a brother who was killed. So he says, I was really in search of my brother, not God. What is this? How could have generations of people who either lionized him or demonized him? Forget about these passages. For a Muslim to say at the end of his Hajj pilgrimage, I didn't go to Hajj in search of God. I went in search of my brother. Peyman has written a book in search of his brother and his own trauma of dealing with his own young brother's death. This is the history that is not written. You rightly say, Professor Lutz, that Professor Garcia, that people don't know in Spain these things, but we do. We know about people who are forgotten in history, who have been turned into these, caricatures of realities that they represented. So yes, I do understand the culture of Twitter. And for a period of time, I had a Facebook, almost 70,000 people were in it. But at some point, I just shut it off. It was corroding into my soul. I was forgetting where I'm coming from. You become a creature of internet. I'm not a creature of internet. I was born and raised in a little, neighborhood in southern Iran. So the more you begin to go back and it's Gramsci, is not nativism. Gramsci says you need to have an inventory of yourself. Without an inventory of yourself. So the book in a sense is an inventory of me as a person, as a human being, who next June I'll be 70. And, about 40 years of it I have lived in this country, has a particular genealogy of birth and growth and old age and so forth. And without actively remembering and actively retrieving and actively theorizing, devoid of any, ideological conviction. We all have ideological convictions or political persuasions. We really are not writing, we are regurgitating, and I for one, as my many of my other colleagues, we have been there, we have done that. I don't have to publish a book, but I get up and I start rethinking and I start rewriting. At any rate, I didn't mean to get choked up, but the scene that I remembered at the end of Sangi Barguri, the tombstone, when he goes to the gravesite of this old aunt, Amme Khanum, who was also childless. But you see, there he doesn't tell you that earlier, a few pages earlier, he tells you that she was childless. This connection over the gravesite or gravestone is what the image of it stood with me, and I could not forget. At any rate, I am grateful to Moises, to Professor Garcia, delighted to meet her, and to my dear friend Peyman. I hope we still, and the araksagi that Peyman was saying, this very particular Iranian drink, to think of it as mezcal. That's mezcal for Iran.
Very rough mezcal.
Very rough.
I have a bottle here.
If Ale heard me say that, she would be upset. At any rate, that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, dear Ustaz. Now we still have time for a kind of feedback, maybe perhaps 5 minutes for Luz and 5 minutes for Peyman, just if they want to, I don't know, create a feedback. And then I have questions by our audience who are very interested in a couple of details of the book and a couple of details of the Jalal Ahmed himself. So I would like to request from Luz 2-3 minutes comment, and then Peyman, and then go with our students and our audience. Please, Luz, if you have a feedback or you have a comment to Ustaz Dabashi's comments.
So thank you very much, Ustaz Dabashi, for your comments. And it has been great, marvelous for me hearing what you have explained about the meaning of small things, the meaning of the quotidianity, and how this history is not the history only of Jalal Ahmad, but the history, of course, of all the generation, but your history. Because it's very important for us, at least here in Spain and in the Spanish Academy and for women, just hear about this new way of reading history, not only by us women, but by the men of the old generation. You are from not my generation, not so long for me, but not my generation. And so this is very important, really, because it came from the other side of this game of places of comfort where we are as academics. So thank you very much. It has been very, very insightful, this voice of gender, of generations, and of different ways of writing the history. And when you are talking about this need of telling your history with the other histories, and I was remembering a famous passage of Mahmoud Darwish, and I was trying to look for it in internet, but in English, but I can't find it. And he says something like, I am thinking in Arabic and Spanish and now in English, so it may be a bit difficult, the translation, but it's just a good play between language and traveling in translation. Darwish said something like, who writes his history will possess the history, and he will be the owner of the last meaning. So I think that it's very important, this new way of telling the history, in order to possess the history by the people, not only in the decolonizing mind, but also in the other language, the other people, and the other gender, and the who has been out of the history. So thank you very much, because it has been very very insightful for me here in your reading of my impressions of the books. Thank you.
Thank you, very dear Luz. Now we are going to with Payman, if he wants to feedback something. Thank you, Payman.
Sure, thanks. It's been a wonderful engagement. Thank you all for doing this and being here. I just reached out to my Al Ahmad books here on my shelf, and so I have different, actually of Gharb Zadegi, I think I have 2 different versions. Anyways, yes, it's, you know, when I read this book about Al Ahmad and some other books on some other phenomena, it's not just exclusively this one, but you know what it immediately strikes me with is the idea that how could all this scholarship that has been put into Iranian studies has missed all this, right? And so you know, my problem, you know, and I have many historian friends, and behind me is the picture of my, you know, friend and mentor, late Professor Khosrow Shakeri, who taught me actually how to read history, how to be critical in reading history, not interpreted in the way that your values, you know, in our age, you know, with the whole nativist argument, my liberal values lead me to, but how history works itself out and how it comes together as a body of action and words and things and policies and all these things that come together to create history, right? And my sense of astonishment is that how did we miss all these things, you know, in previous studies, right? So this book on Al Ahmad actually brings those complexities and paradoxes and everything that's important together. So yeah, to a I don't know, most scholars, it really doesn't matter, or it makes no sense, or is of no value that Ala Ahmad goes, visits his aunt's, childless aunt's, grave, in trying to mourn for himself, his own childlessness. But this is like, what I say, it's just every good intellectual history in particular, but every good history has to find the master code of that era and decode it, and then get into this. History is not a sequence of events, in particular context. It's actually, formation of ideas. And that's what is shown in this book. So I was looking at this, like, honest, like you mentioned many times in your book, and here also, Professor Dabashi, that he's very honest, right? And in his book, Yek Shah o Do Chale, I don't know how you translate that, 2 ditches and 1 well, or 1, whatever, whatever that means, in his own very, very, idiosyncratic writing. He talks about his guilt of having received monies from his friend Ibrahim Golestan, who was working for the British Petroleum Company, making documentaries, and asked him to translate or things. And he feels guilty about receiving money from the British colonizers, right? Ultimately, right? And of course, Golestan made a fortune, and, now he lives in a castle in England, and so on and so, right? So, fine, but the man is honest with himself, right? But I think, I was just, going through this while we were talking, and there is a little passage here in this book that basically is the epitome of what Ala Ahmad achieved. And, I just read it, translate it as I read it. He says, in this era of silence, that's post-coup era, I did some translations in order to learn French. And here he plays the word français, French, and he says fanarse. He actually makes fun of the word, and just it's his idiosyncratic style, right? From Gide and Camus and Sartre, and of course Dostoevsky, and so on and so forth. And I get married in this era, or in this period. And this is the key thing about Ala Ahmad. These are codes that we must decode when we read history, and this book has done it, fabulously. When you are cut off from the larger society, you create the smaller version of it in your own home, right? And then he talks about his wife and how, so this is about, in those words, I see Ala Ahmad trying to create his utopia, right? In a very dystopian world, right? In a world that denies him in every step, right? And this is the key thing in understanding Ala Ahmad. I think that's what makes this work, this particular book, very important in registering Ala Ahmad, right? And in reference to Luz's idea that well, nobody heard of Ala because it hasn't been worked on, right? Sorry, I don't want to advertise here, so bad. But like Mustafa Shoayan was probably one of the most original Marxists in Iranian history, and no one had ever worked on him. Everybody just shunned him because he's just like Ala Ahmad. He was idiosyncratic, right? He didn't write in Marxist jargon. He wrote in his own existential sort of phenomenological way. He wrote about things that he thought were important, right? So this is why so we need the area of sort of more or less Iranian studies, for the lack of better term, is really filled with so many ambiguities and so many undiscovered territories that we really need to go into those and bring them out. And this book is a wonderful step in that direction.
If I could add, Musa, just 1 minute, I just want to say the significance of the work that you and Professor Garcia are doing in Mexico, by extension, and the rest of Latin America, and in Spain, whether it is translating Mahmoud Darwish, or writing a book about Mujahideen Khalq, or having conferences on Palestine, on Iran, or knowing scholars of the field. in UNAM, in El Colegio Mexico, etc. You are really the window. I don't know what metaphor to use. The mirror. Uh, in Persian, we have something called Ayne Iskandari, Alexander's mirror. Is a legendary mirror that presumably Aristotle made for Alexander in Alexandria, a tower on top of which was some sort of a mirror that showed the surrounding. Moises, my dear sweet Moises, is just like a Alexander mirror, just standing there in the middle of UNAM and being a mirror of what's going around Mexico. The same is with Professor Garcia and her translation of and other works of Palestine. So without you, you know, people like me and Peyman would be just talking to each other. But the fact that this very book, I just had an opportunity to do it in Mexico, in Canada, in Spain. Soon I will have it in South Korea and another friend in Canada, the eastern part of Canada. Then in London, then in Oxford, then I had one already in Turkey. The Turkish colleagues' readings are very, very important because they have a whole different take on Shariati. They are devoted to Shariati, and they were not very comfortable with my reading of Al-Ahmad. At any rate, it gives us an opportunity to go around the globe. The moral of the story is, Professor Garcia, you're not alone. You're part of a different imaginative community that connects you to a equally important world as, you know, my beloved Madrid, that I spend the younger daughter, who is now a professor of English literature, her birthday years ago. I was invited by Casa Americano for a lecture series in Madrid. So I have beautiful memories of Reina Sofia and other beautiful, magnificent museums and I even have a picture with me and Cervantes, you know, in the middle of Madrid, that beautiful statue of Sancho Panza and Don Quixote. I have a picture of me standing there holding the thing of Don Quixote. So I'm very happy that you joined us.
Thank you very much. Please, if you don't mind, I would like to share with you some questions by our audience. Just if you want to say something, just is one question for all of panelists about the crisis of ideas that we have today. Now we have some intellectual ideas crisis. We have a few intellectuals, Byung-Chul Han, Yuval Harari, Slavoj Žižek, but the ideas that we have right now not produce a new kind of disobedience, just as in the 60s. How do you recommend to reconnect with the 60s ideas production to overcome the current crisis of ideas that we have today? The second question is if you have poems, by your own, I mean, if you have written your own poems. Ravi Reyes say that congratulations to all, and where the book can be get it. And Diana Ray, how Jalal Ahmad can be reflected in today's young intellectuals is very similar to the other question. And general questions about pandemics. How do you consider if pandemics has impacted militant and social movements in the Middle East? And well, some another comments that I haven't, but these are the questions. So if you agree, I would request a couple of minutes for Luz, a couple of minutes for Peyman, a couple of minutes for Hamid, to try to make a general comment about these questions, please. So please, Luz.
I think that the question about how to fill the gap between the 60s and now with ideas for the present crisis, and how to take advantage from the 60s. I am not sure what, as I have said, what can I say? Which I am sure is that we are now in a very critical moment. And I think that the 60s were a critical moment too, because it was just the moment at the middle of the, how would you say, at the top of the end of the Second World War, and just this was the top, and then we began just the to go down, and we are now just at the down of that moment. So this is a critical moment, just at the contrary, the opposite of that moment. So I think that it's very important, some points that Ustaz Dabashi have looked at them as the point of the meaning of small things, the meaning of not looking to the difference between genders, the meaning of forgetting generations, the meaning of there is no borders between West and East, between North and South. And even I will say that there is no, that we are not now in a post-Islamist moment, but even more beyond that moment. So if we take advantage of the 60s, when all of this kind of crisis and troubles were not so evident, we can see how to forget and to go through the crisis of ideas. But I will not say that we are in a period of no ideas. We have ideas, but not the good ideas we will like to have. They are liquid. They are always ideas against the old ideas, and we need to go with the new, and there are new ideas. It's difficult, and I think that here in Spain, at least, I speak in local terms. You know that in 2011 we had the Indignados movement, and it was a very important movement. And from here and from the Arab War and the Mediterranean, we began a new age. And now we are at a black moment, but the ideas, they are there, and the people, they are there. So I think that we need to fight, just not to get conquisted and derroted, but the all ideas, just to fight.
Thank you very much, dear Luz. Now we are going to with Payman about a general comment, please. Payman, thank you.
Those are wonderful questions. I think Luz just answered it fabulously. Just, in a recent article, I called this age the age of exhaustion. And by exhaustion, I don't mean there aren't ideas. It just, there is no energy. And it actually is about, the post World War II age of national liberations, and now in kind of decline. It doesn't mean that there aren't ideas. I teach in classes that I teach social movement, social justice, things like that. And these courses, social change, these courses give me opportunity to bring out ideas that, students and general public are never exposed to. So I talk about the Zapatistas in Mexico, for example, who have been, self-ruling for 27 years, over 250,000 people, of indigenous Mayan people. I talk about Rojava, in one of the most embattled zones in the world. They are trying to keep this, democratic confederalism of Kurds and Arabs and Assyrians and Izadis and so on. And all of these, for, governing 2 million people on democratic platform for about 9 years or 8 years now, right? And I talk about the experiment of the female only, women only community of Ujama in Kenya. I talk about the village of Marinaleda in Spain, and all those creative experiments that cannot go beyond their locality, cannot go beyond, cannot grow into a universal idea, precisely because we are in the age of absolute, that shouldn't say absolute, but dominating and overwhelming hegemonization of state system and capitalism that is propagating itself through social media. And I think you can tell I don't have social media, just like Professor. I was on Facebook. I didn't have 70,000 followers. I have a few hundred, but then I said, like, so what? Just that I want to step back and think about this. As somebody who's concerned about this, right? So we have no shortage of creative responses to this crisis, and it's a profound civilizational crisis. But I think that energy is being diverted and stolen from us, from putting together our efforts. For one thing, because of the propagation through social media and so on and so forth, right? We no longer have to be socialized into. We no longer have to be socialized into dominant or hegemonic ideas through mainstream media. It's all over, just follow it, from your, friends and so on. It's all over the place, and you become numb about the things that you hear. And by the way, with respect to the pandemic, just a funny comment that I was driving here actually to my office and, at university, and I was thinking, oh, gee, wasn't it some time ago, all European countries wanted to ban the face covering of Muslims, and now everybody in the world is face covering. And that's one of the things about pandemic. It's fabulous to observe these things, But I don't have it, the pandemic has, at least in the Iranian case, has served the government. We had two great grassroots movements in Iran that were repressed, in a very violent way. And, if the pandemic didn't happen, it was very likely that grassroots movements would continue. But, so pandemic, I think, is just serving the powers that be at this moment. We'll see how it goes. That's my just very non-professional commentary. I'm not, I don't know anything about the pandemics and so on. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you, dear Payman. Ustaz Dabashi, please, you close the panel, Ustaz, please.
Yeah. First of all, I'm grateful that friends have joined us in live stream Facebook. Thank you for taking time to join us. Second, if you wish to obtain the book, please don't buy the hard cover that is out. Is very expensive. Just ask your local library to order it for you. A digital version is about to come out. In fact, I'm in the middle of preparing the paperwork, abstracts, etc., for the digital copy, which will be globally available in open source and readily available. Hopefully, that you will get to see it and read it. Then, wonderful questions that are asked, as my colleague said. More than anything else, I'm happy that they're engaged with our conversation. But as to new ideas, I agree with Professor Garcia. I don't think we lack ideas. The issue is the topography and landscape of how we get to know or disregard, and what a limited attention span this digital condition has generated for us. I give you two examples. My elder daughter, who is now a professor of English in Nevada, when she was a teenager and had started her radical sort of episode, one day she told me, if you are such a hotshot radical, how come you were not in Woodstock? I said, well, I was in my own Woodstock. Not everybody was in the United States Woodstock. We had different kind of Woodstock. We were in Woodstock of our own. certain metaphors, such as Woodstock, has become globalized by virtue of the power and hegemony of these cultures. That people in Spain or in Mexico or in Canada or in Africa, Asia, they have their own Woodstock, but they have not self-universalized, as Peyman was just saying. The other anecdote I tell is from Sa'di, our glorious 13th century poet. He has a little story that Peyman will remember it, and so will Moises. منجمی به خانه در آمد. Astronomer comes home. یکی مرد بیگانه دید که با زن او به هم نشسته. It's so good. He saw a strange man at home with his wife. سقط و دشنام گفت فتنه و آشوب برخاست. He grabs hold of a man. You bastard, what are you doing here? Get lost and such. Somebody was passing and turns to him and says, تو بر اوج فلک چه دانی چیست? What the hell do you know what's happening high in the heavens? چون ندانی که در سرایت کیست. We don't know who is in your own home. And you're looking for stars in thing. The news is that NASA just flew a helicopter over Mars. I mean, it's out of our imagination. It is amazing scientific thing because, you know, they are paving the way for Trump's space army. You know, okay, Jimmy is just like that astronomer. Our task is to understand what is happening in our home, get to know our own home. I conclude with a reference to a letter that Sohrab Sapehi wrote to one of his friends. He said, listen, I haven't still discovered this chair that is in my room. I haven't had time yet to discover this chair. There's so much about this chair that I haven't discovered. I don't want to go out and explore things. The assumption, in fact, I was reading an anecdote by a scholar of medieval Jewish philosophy. So the assumption that everybody knows about anything, Averroes knew about Avicenna, and Avicenna knew about Aristotle, is really very modern invention. People were very domestic. Small is beautiful. People were we have to relearn the domesticity, not just of the material life, of intellectual life, of moral imagination. That's the thing that is missing. I'm not, you know, oh, let's look for Zizek, where is my pillow? I mean, bless his soul, you know, let him have his childish thing, but he's not in touch with anything. Okay, good for him. I mean, I'm happy for him. He's a colleague and he has a corner shop, as we say, you know, all the power to him. But the reality is somewhere else, is rediscovery of domesticity rather than exacerbating this vacuous universalism that is digitized and really is ephemeral. To me, right now, at the conclusion of this conversation, what is important is Moises, Sessi is his wife, Ale, our mutual friend, is Peyman, sitting there in his office, my dear friend, Professor Garcia, that I just met, and soon she has to go for her family dinner. This is what is real, despite the fact that it's digital. So the fact that in reality, this very conversation is competing with billions of other events that are happening around the internet, I couldn't care less. It doesn't really matter. And the conclusion, we say goodbye. I go to the kitchen, start cooking rigatone and salmone for my beautiful young daughter and son. And my son is a vegetarian, doesn't eat anything. And that is a beautiful day in and of itself. There is no grander illusion that this conversation has changed the world, or if you read my book, you know, something extraordinary is going to happen. If, as you have kindly spent time from your precious life, your own writing, your own thinking, and spend half an hour, 2 hours, whatever, with that book, and something in that book has triggered in you your own thinking. I was just, as I talked about Al Ahmad's visit to Mecca and in search of his brother, suddenly I remembered Peyman's own book about his brother, Kitab Ali. This is really what it's all about. After this, finish khalas. Inshallah, we get together in Mexico, have some mezcal together. Inshallah, we get to Madrid and have some tapas and beautiful wine together. Inshallah, we get to Canada, and I don't know, we have something together there as well. But beyond that, friends, is just nothing, is a vacuity of a grand illusion of important ideas and philosophers, etc., which no longer exist. You know, just sit down and wonder, as Sohrab Saveri said, I haven't discovered this chair in my room yet. Thank you, Moises.
Thank you very much, dear Stas. Thank you very much, very dear Luz and Professor Peyman. Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. I know my students are still in the Facebook webpage. I can watch the streaming right now. And I know, I am sure that they will be very happy for discover more things like this in every single conference, meeting, book that we can review, just in connection with our own lives. This is the most important in order to think and rethink that this life, as least as we know, is lived just once, and we have to do our best life and to be conscious and to feel our lives the best as we can. So thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. I will put the details of the book and the discount of the book just in the very same site in the Facebook web page, just for the people who are interested in obtaining the book. And I will remember that we will have a discount for the Edinburgh University Press. And of course, you are very welcome when all of this awful context can be diminished and inshallah finishes, to come to Mexico, as always say, and this is my evidence. Please, every time I have the opportunity to see Luz, please come to Mexico, please come to my university, just as we do with my friends, just like Hamid, just like Peyman. And I hope that this can be real in a short time, as soon as we can. In the time, please keep in safe, take care, take your family, your friends, the people you love, and I hope we can meet each other very soon. Please, thank you very much for everything this evening, this afternoon in Madrid. Khodafez, goodbye, salama, bye-bye.